The first shirt hit the lawn at 6:47 in the evening. My white dress shirt, the one I wore to church, to parent-teacher conferences, to every occasion that required me to look like a man who had his life together. It landed in the wet grass next to the mailbox, arms spread open like it was surrendering on my behalf. I was standing on my own porch in Gloucester, Massachusetts, on October 15, 2025, a Wednesday, still wearing the same flannel I'd had on for 3 days straight. The flannel I wore sitting beside my father's bed, while the morphine drip counted down the hours he had left. The flannel that still smelled like the Rockport cottage, like with smoke and salt air, and the eucalyptus my mother kept in a bowl by the door because she said it helped him breathe. My father, Edmund Ashford, had died 27 hours ago, and I had driven home to get my suit for his funeral. My key didn't work. The deadbolt had been changed. I knocked. Nothing. Knocked harder. "Nora, it's me. Open the door." The bedroom window slid open and my wife's face appeared. Nora Ashford, 41 years old, the woman I had married 16 years ago at a little church on Cape Ann. While the fog rolled in off the Atlantic, she looked down at me the way you look at something you've decided to throw away. "You don't live here anymore, Griffin." "What are you talking about? My father just died yesterday. I need my suit for the funeral. I want a divorce. I've already called a lawyer." Before I could respond, she disappeared from the window. I thought she was coming to the door. Instead, the window opened wider and my clothes started flying. The white shirt first, then a bundle of pants, then my work boots spinning through the air, landing in the hydrangeas with a thud that startled the neighbor's cat. My leather jacket came next, the one my father had given me for my 30th birthday 14 years ago at a restaurant in Rockport where we ate fried clams, and he told me he was proud of the man I was becoming. It landed in a puddle near the driveway. A cardboard box followed, splitting open on the walkway, scattering books, a framed photo of me and Dad on his boat, and the watch my mother had given me when I graduated high school. "Take your stuff and leave, Griffin." Across the street, Bev Callahan's front door opened. Bev was 58, lived alone, knew everything that happened on Maple Street before the people it happened to knew. She stepped onto her porch with her hand pressed against her chest, watching. The Pattersons came out next door. Then the Garcias, 3 houses down, standing on their steps with their arms folded. My wife was throwing my life out a window, and the whole street had front row seats. I looked up at Nora. She was already turning away, reaching for another arm load. I said nothing. I walked across the lawn, picked up my leather jacket, shook the water off it, held it to my chest for a second, then folded it and placed it in the bed of my truck. I picked up the work boots from the hydrangeas. I gathered the shirts one by one, folded the pants, collected the books and the photo and the watch from the broken box on the walkway, one piece at a time in full view of every neighbor on Maple Street. I picked up everything my wife had thrown away and placed it in my truck. Bev called out from her porch, her voice cracking. "Griffin, honey, are you okay? Do you need anything?" I looked at her, opened my mouth, closed it. I wanted to tell her that my father was dead and my wife had locked me out of my own house and tomorrow was the funeral, and I didn't even have a suit to wear. But the words wouldn't come. My throat was sealed shut by something heavier than grief. Something that felt like the weight of every year I had spent trying to hold this marriage together, pressing down on my chest all at once. I shook my head, got in my truck, started the engine. The last thing I saw in the rearview mirror was Nora closing the window without looking down. She turned off the bedroom light like she was closing out a register at the end of a shift. Transaction complete. Customer dismissed. I drove the 10 miles to Rockport in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the road and the dark and the smell of my father's flannel and the sound of my own breathing, which was the only thing I could still control. My mother, Colette, was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in carrying an armload of wrinkled clothes. She was 68 years old. She had lost the man she'd been married to for 46 years less than 2 days ago. She hadn't slept, hadn't eaten much, had spent the morning calling relatives, and the afternoon addressing envelopes with shaking hands. But when she saw me standing in her doorway holding my clothes like a refugee, she didn't ask a single question. "The blue suit is in the hall closet," she said. "Your father kept one here for church. It should fit you. Mom, try it on. If it needs hemming, I can do it tonight." She stood up, kissed me on the forehead and went to find the suit. That was my mother. The world could be on fire, and she'd find the one thing that needed doing and do it quietly, without complaint, without drama. I understood in that moment where my father had learned his patience. The funeral was Thursday, October 16th at St. Anne's Church. The building was standing room only. Fishermen in clean flannels, mechanics with grease still under their nails, shopkeepers who had known Edmund Ashford for 40 years. Captain Teddy Monroe came in a wheelchair, oxygen tank and all, because he said he would be damned if he missed saying goodbye to the best man he'd ever fished with. Maria Santos from the bait shop on Roger Street brought white lilies from her garden because my father had fixed her boat motor for free in the winter of 2003 and wouldn't take a dime for it. The Henriksen brothers stood in the back row shoulder to shoulder, caps in their hands, eyes red. 200 people came to say goodbye to a fisherman. My wife was not one of them. Nora dropped Iris and Rowan at the church entrance and drove away without getting out of the car. I watched through the window as her tail lights disappeared down Main Street. My daughter, 14 years old, took her 11-year-old brother's hand and walked into the church without looking back. I delivered the eulogy in my father's blue suit, wide in the shoulders, short in the sleeves, but it fit well enough. I stood at the pulpit and looked out at every face I'd ever known and a few I didn't. My father used to say that the ocean doesn't care if you're in a hurry. I told them. You do the job right or you don't do it at all. He lived that way. Everything he did with patience, with care. He never cut corners on a repair, never walked away from a friend who needed help, never raised his voice when a quiet word would do. I set my notes aside, couldn't read them through the blur. When they told him it was cancer back in February, the first thing he said to me was, "Don't make a fuss." 8 months of chemotherapy. 8 months of driving to Mass General at 5 in the morning. 8 months of watching this man, this giant, get smaller and thinner and weaker. And not once, not a single time did he complain. He just kept waking up, kept drinking his coffee on the porch, kept watching the boats head out. The last thing he said to me was, "Take care of your mother." Then he squeezed my hand and he was gone. I paused. The church was so quiet I could hear the candle flames moving in the draft from the old windows. He was the most patient man I ever knew, and I'm going to miss him every single day for the rest of my life. Captain Teddy started clapping from his wheelchair. One by one the whole congregation rose. 200 people on their feet applauding a fisherman's life. And I stood at the pulpit thinking, this is what a man leaves behind. Not money, not things. A room full of people who stand when his name is spoken. Rowan grabbed my hand when I came down from the podium and didn't let go for 30 minutes. His fingers were sweaty and shaking, and he held on like I was the last solid thing in his world. I held on right back. After the service, the church hall filled with casseroles and cold cuts and stories about my father that made people laugh and cry in the same breath. I was standing by the coffee table when a man in a dark suit approached. Early 60s, silver-haired, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He waited until I was alone. "Griffin, I'm deeply sorry about your father. He was one of the finest men I've ever had the privilege of knowing." "Thank you. I'm sorry." "Do I?" "Wallace Kettering. I was your father's attorney and his friend for 32 years. I didn't know my mother or father had an attorney. As far as I knew, he had a fishing boat, a cottage, a modest pension, and not much else." "Your father left instructions," Wallace said quietly. "Matters that need to be discussed, but not today. Today is for grieving. Can you come to my office Monday morning? Kettering and Associates, 84 Federal Street, Boston, 9 o'clock. What kind of matters?" He glanced around the room, lowered his voice. "The kind your father spent a long time preparing for. It's important, Griffin. Please be there." "I'll be there." He squeezed my shoulder. "Your father told me about you every time we spoke. He was extraordinarily proud of you. He said you had his patience and your mother's heart, and that was the best combination a man could have." He walked away. I stood there with a styrofoam cup of bad coffee trying to understand why a fisherman from Rockport would need an attorney on Federal Street in Boston. Friday and Saturday I spent at my mother's cottage. Lawson drove down from Portland. My brother was 39, 5 years younger, built like a fire hydrant, worked as a welder at Bath Iron Works. He had our father's hands and our mother's temper, which was a dangerous combination. When I told him what Nora did, the kitchen chair went over backwards. "She threw your clothes on the lawn the day after Dad died while the neighbors watched." "Lawson, sit down. I'm driving over there right now. I swear to God, Griffin. You're going to sit down and drink your coffee and let me handle this." "Handle it how? By being patient? By being quiet? That woman humiliated you in front of the entire street on the worst day of your life. I know what she did. And you just picked everything up and drove away without saying a word. What was I supposed to say? Something? Anything?" He was pacing now, the way he did when the anger had nowhere to go. "You're too much like Dad. You know that? He never fought back either. He just took it. Whatever life threw at him, he just took it and kept going." My mother, who had been washing dishes at the sink, turned around and put a hand on each of Lawson's shoulders. "Your brother handled it with dignity," she said, "just like your father would have. Now sit down before you break something else in my kitchen. Lawson sat, but I could see the current running through him, hot and bright, looking for something to burn. Something isn't right, I said. Nora's been distant for months, but this, changing locks, throwing my stuff out, filing for divorce while I'm burying my father, this isn't just unhappiness. Something happened or someone happened. Lawson looked at me. You think she's seeing someone? I think I need to find out what's going on before I do anything. Dad always said, don't fix a problem until you understand it. Pull the engine apart before you start replacing parts. Dad also said, sometimes you've got to scrap the whole boat. Not yet. Not until I know what I'm dealing with. Monday morning, October 20th, I drove to Boston in the only clean shirt I had and found Kettering and Associates on the 14th floor of an old brick building on Federal Street. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings of sailing ships, leather chairs that 3 generations of clients had broken in, the kind of office that smelled like old money and good decisions. Wallace met me in the lobby and led me to a conference room overlooking the financial district. Coffee, please. He poured 2 cups, sat across from me and opened a leather folder. Griffin, your father came to me in 1993. He needed help with a real estate matter. That professional relationship turned into a friendship that lasted until the day he died. In 32 years, I never met a more deliberate man. Everything he did for a reason. That sounds like Dad. In 1987, when your father was 33, he purchased a parcel of waterfront land in Gloucester, 3 acres on the harbor, east side, near the old paint factory. I knew the spot. Rocky, overgrown, rusted chain-link fence. I'd driven past it 1,000 times on my way to the shop. That empty lot by Wheeler's Point? He paid $40,000 for it. His entire savings at the time. Everyone told him he was insane. No road access, zoning problems, environmental issues from the old factory. People laughed at him. Griffin, that sounds like Dad too. He once bought a boat hull that was missing the entire stern because he said he could see what it wanted to become. Wallace smiled. Your father could see things other people couldn't. He saw what that land would become. He slid a document across the table. That property is now assessed at $4.7 million. I read the number, read it again. That's not possible. Gloucester's waterfront has been transformed over the past 20 years. Tourism, marina development, luxury residential construction. Your father's 3 acres are among the most valuable undeveloped waterfront parcels on the North Shore. He received offers from developers, hotel chains, condo builders. He turned them all down. Why? Because he had a vision for that land, a maritime heritage center, a place to preserve Gloucester's fishing history, to teach boat building, to keep the old trades alive for the next generation. Wallace paused. He wanted you to build it? My hands were shaking. I set down my coffee so I wouldn't spill it. There's more, Wallace said. He opened another section of the folder. Your father lived frugally, deliberately so. Over 40 years, he saved and invested with a discipline that frankly impressed me, and I've worked with some very wealthy individuals. Between the property and his financial portfolio, your father's total estate is valued at approximately $6.2 million. The number hit me like a wave. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. My father, who wore the same 3 flannel shirts in rotation, who drove a truck with 213,000 miles on it, who brought fish home for dinner because he'd caught them himself, had been sitting on $6 million and never breathed a word. The will is specific, Wallace continued. You receive the waterfront property valued at $4.7 million to develop as a heritage center or sell at your discretion. You receive 70% of remaining financial assets, approximately $1.05 million. Your mother receives the Rockport Cottage lifetime trust income and 20%, roughly $300,000. Lawson receives 10%, approximately $150,000. Does anyone else know about this? No one. Your mother knew about the property but not its current value. Your father insisted on absolute privacy. Why? Wallace set down his pen and looked at me directly. Because your father was protecting you. All assets bequeathed to you are held within a protective trust legally classified as separate property. Under Massachusetts law, they cannot be claimed, divided, or accessed by a spouse in any divorce proceeding. The room went very still. He did that on purpose. I said he did. Because of Nora. Wallace chose his words the way a man chooses tools before a delicate repair. Your father never interfered in your marriage, that wasn't his nature, but he was observant. Over the past few years he expressed concerns to me. He asked me to structure the estate so that no matter what happened, you and the children would be protected. I thought about my father sitting in this same chair across from this same man, making plans to protect the son who didn't even know he needed protecting. Making those plans while cancer was eating him alive. There's one more thing, Wallace said. He reached into the folder and pulled out a manila envelope. In July, 3 months ago, your father hired a private investigator. He what? During one of your visits to Rockport, he noticed changes in Nora's behavior. She was distant, preoccupied, secretive. He asked me to recommend someone discreet. I referred him to Pauline Bright. She's former FBI, one of the best in the business. He slid the envelope across the table. Her findings are inside. I've reviewed them. Griffin, I'm sorry. I opened it. 23 pages, photographs. Nora and a man I'd never seen before. Entering the Langham Hotel in downtown Boston, May 12th. Sitting together at a restaurant in the Seaport District, June 3rd. His hand on her back in a parking garage, July 19th. Her head on his shoulder at an outdoor cafe in Newburyport, August 28th. Photograph after photograph dated from May through September 2025. The man was identified as Dominic Prow, age 46, commercial real estate developer based in Boston. Divorced twice. 3 civil suits filed against him in 3 different states by 3 different women, all settled out of court. Known in certain professional circles as a man who targeted married women, particularly those who were unhappy and vulnerable to attention. They met through Nora's real estate agency, Wallace said. Prow was looking at properties in the Salem area. The relationship began in late April or May. 5 months. While I was driving to Rockport 3 times a week to hold my dying father's hand. While I was sitting in the chemo ward at Mass General watching poison drip into his veins. While I was trying to keep my family from falling apart, my wife was in hotel rooms with a man who drove a Porsche Cayenne and told her she deserved better than a boat mechanic. I closed the envelope. What do you want to do? Wallace asked. I want you to send her a letter. What kind of letter? I looked at him. The kind she'll remember for the rest of her life. Wallace studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll draft it today. The certified letter arrived on Thursday, October 23rd. I know exactly what happened when Nora opened it because Iris told me everything later that night. Nora came home from work around 5:30, sorted through the mail on the kitchen counter, and found a thick envelope from Kettering and Associates, 84 Federal Street, Boston. She didn't recognize the name. She opened it, standing up, still wearing her coat. The letter was 4 pages long. Wallace had written it with the precision of a man who had spent 40 years understanding that the right words, arranged in the right order, could be more devastating than any weapon. First paragraph. She was being contacted as the spouse of Griffin Ashford in connection with the estate of Edmund Ashford, deceased. Second paragraph. Griffin was the primary beneficiary of an estate valued in excess of $6 million, including waterfront property in Gloucester assessed at $4.7 million. Third paragraph. All assets were held in a protective trust classified as separate property under Massachusetts law, excluded from any marital division, equitable distribution, or spousal claim in any divorce proceeding. Fourth paragraph. Kettering and Associates had been retained to represent Griffin in all legal matters, including the pending divorce. Fifth paragraph. The firm was in possession of documented evidence, including dated photographs, financial records, and investigative reports, establishing an extramarital relationship between Nora Ashford and one Dominic Prow, and that this evidence would be submitted in any custody proceeding as relevant to parental fitness and moral character. Final paragraph, 1 sentence. Mr. Ashford looks forward to resolving these matters in a manner that prioritizes the well-being of his children Iris and Rowan. Iris told me her mother read the first page standing up. By the second page she was leaning against the counter, gripping the edge with one hand. By the third page she had slid to the floor. By the fourth page she was sitting on the kitchen tiles with the letter in her lap, mouth open, eyes unfocused, staring at the refrigerator like it was a window into a future that had just disappeared. Then the sound came. Iris said it was the worst sound she had ever heard. Not crying, not screaming, something in between, something that came from a place so deep it didn't have a name. A sound like a person realizing all at once with absolute clarity that they have destroyed their own life and there is no way to undo it. Mom? Iris came into the kitchen. Mom. What's wrong? What happened? Nora couldn't speak. She just sat on the floor, the letter crumpled against her chest, making that sound. Iris picked up the pages that had fallen. She was 14 sharp, a fast reader. She didn't understand every legal phrase, but she understood enough. She understood that her grandfather, The quiet fisherman who taught her to bait a hook on the Rockport pier when she was 6, who told her stories about the old boats and the old storms and the old men who sailed them, had left behind millions. She understood that her father was going to be okay. And she understood from the 5th paragraph that her mother had been with another man. She put the letter down, went to her room and called me. "Dad, you need to come home. Something happened." "Are you okay? Is Rowan there?" "I'm fine. Rowan's at basketball practice. Mom got a letter. She's on the kitchen floor. She won't stop crying." Pause. "Dad, Grandpa Eddie had $6 million? It's complicated, sweetheart." "It doesn't sound complicated. It sounds like Grandpa was a lot smarter than anybody knew." I almost smiled. She had her grandmother's directness. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced? Your mom and I have things to work through. But listen to me. Whatever happens between your mother and me, nothing changes between you and me. You and Rowan are my whole world. Nothing touches that. Do you understand?" "I understand." Another pause, longer this time. "Dad, I'm glad Grandpa protected you." I didn't respond to that. It wasn't the kind of thing a father should agree to out loud, even when every cell in his body wants to. Within 48 hours, Nora's world collapsed like a house built on sand. She called me 17 times. I let every call go to voicemail. The first 3 were angry. "How dare you have me investigated, Griffin? How dare you go behind my back? This is a violation of my privacy, and I will fight this in court." Then the tone shifted. By call number 7, "Griffin, please, we need to talk. I can explain everything if you'll just let me explain." By call number 12, she was crying so hard the words dissolved. "I made a mistake. I know I made a terrible mistake. Please don't take the kids. Please, I'm begging you." I sat at my mother's kitchen table and listened to every single one. I owed her that much. 16 years of marriage, 2 children, a life that used to mean something. I owed it to that life to hear her fall apart. But I didn't call back. Wallace sent a second letter directing all communication through legal counsel. She drove to Rockport on a Saturday morning. My mother answered the door in her housecoat, still carrying the grief of a woman who had buried her husband 9 days earlier. She looked at Nora for a long time, the kind of look that doesn't need words because the words have already been said by everything that happened before this moment. "You should have come to the funeral, Nora." Then she closed the door. Not a slam. My mother didn't slam doors. She closed it with the same steady, quiet finality she brought to everything and went back to her kitchen. Nora stood on the porch for 5 minutes. I watched from the upstairs window. Her hand was raised like she was going to knock again, but she never did. She just stood there alone, and then she turned and walked to her car and drove away. She tried to reach Dominic Prow. His phone was disconnected. She drove to his office on Summer Street in Boston, the sleek glass building she had visited a dozen times over the past 5 months. The receptionist, who used to greet her with a warm smile, stared through her. "Mr. Prow is traveling abroad. He has not left forwarding contact information." Dominic Prow had left the country the same week the letter was sent. Wallace told me later that the investigator, Pauline Bright, had tracked his pattern across 3 states: Chicago 2019, Atlanta 2021, Miami 2023. Always the same operation: find a married woman who was unhappy, shower her with attention, convince her to leave her husband, position himself to benefit from the divorce settlement, and when things got legally complicated, vanish. He was never interested in Nora. He was interested in what Nora could deliver once she had access to marital assets. But there were no assets worth taking. The house was mortgaged. My boat shop turned a modest profit. Our savings were thin, and the $6 million Nora didn't know existed was locked inside a trust that her name would never touch. She had thrown away a 16-year marriage, 2 children's stability, and her own dignity for a man who had already booked his flight out of the country before the letter arrived. The divorce took 4 months. Wallace handled everything with the same quiet precision my father would have appreciated. The protective trust was ironclad. Nora's attorney, a young guy from Salem who was clearly outmatched by Wallace Kettering the way a rowboat is outmatched by an aircraft carrier, tried to argue the trust should be classified as marital property. The judge dismissed the motion in 9 minutes. Custody was the only thing I fought for. Wallace presented the evidence. The affair documented in 23 pages of photographs and financial records, the abandonment of the children during the funeral, the refusal to attend the service, the decision to change the locks and throw a grieving man's belongings onto the lawn for the neighborhood to see. The judge awarded me primary custody of Iris and Rowan. Nora received visitation every other weekend. On the day the divorce was finalized, February 12, 2026, I drove straight from the Essex County Courthouse to the harbor. I parked at Wheeler's Point, walked through the rusted gate and stood on my father's land. 3 acres of rocky waterfront, seagulls overhead, waves against the breakwater, the smell of salt and diesel, and 100 years of fishing history baked into the soil. I could see the roof line of my boat shop half a mile down the harbor. I could see the fishing fleet heading out for the day just like my father had done for 40 years. I called my mother. "Mom, I'm standing on Dad's land." A long silence. Then softly, "He always said you'd know what to do with it." "I think I do. The Heritage Center." "Yeah, for him. For every fisherman who ever worked this harbor." She was quiet again and I could hear the catch in her breathing, the sound of a woman trying not to cry and almost managing it. "He would have loved that, Griffin, more than anything." 6 months have passed. It's April 2026 now. The snow has melted. The harbor is waking up. And I'm still running my boat shop, still fixing engines, still doing the work my father taught me. But evenings and weekends, I'm out at Wheeler's Point with an architect's plans rolled out on the hood of my truck, mapping out the foundation of the Ashford Maritime Heritage Center. Lawson drives down from Portland every other weekend with his welding rig and a cooler of beer. We work until dark, arguing about the design the way brothers do when they're building something that matters more than either of them. My mother comes by Sundays with sandwiches and lemonade, sits on a folding chair by the water and watches us work. Sometimes I catch her smiling at something only she can see. Iris is 15 now. She volunteers at the Gloucester Maritime Museum on Saturdays, telling visitors about the fishing fleet, about the men who went out in storms and didn't always come back. She talks about her grandfather with pride so fierce it makes my chest ache. Rowan is 11, almost 12, still quiet, still processing. Last month he asked me, "Dad, Grandpa had all that money the whole time?" "Yeah, buddy, he did. But he lived in that tiny cottage, drove that beat-up truck, wore the same 3 shirts." "That's right. Why didn't he spend it?" I thought about it the way my father would have, slowly, carefully, turning the question over to find the honest answer. "Because the money wasn't the point, Rowan. The land was the point. What the land could become. He was saving it for something bigger than himself." Rowan considered this for a while. "That's kind of amazing, actually." "Yeah, it is." Nora moved to a 1-bedroom apartment in Peabody. Different agency, smaller office, lower pay. The real estate community in Salem is small and word travels. I don't know the details and I don't ask. I don't hate her. I tried in those first weeks, lying on my mother's couch at 2 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying the image of my clothes hitting the wet grass. I tried to summon the kind of rage that burns everything down. But it wouldn't take. Hatred requires energy that I'd rather spend on my children and my father's dream. She sees Iris and Rowan every other weekend. The visits are improving. Rowan still hugs her goodbye, long and tight, the way kids do when they're trying to hold 2 broken halves of their world together. Iris is more guarded, still working through something that doesn't have a name yet, but sits behind her eyes like a question she's not ready to ask. Last week Nora asked if we could talk. Just us, no lawyers. We met at a coffee shop on Main Street in Gloucester, 2 blocks from the harbor where my father spent his life. She looked different, thinner, older, tired in a way that went past sleep into something deeper. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that word doesn't fix anything, but I need you to hear me say it." "I hear you." I don't know how to explain what happened. Dominic said things, made me feel like I'd been settling, like you weren't enough, like the life we had wasn't enough. She stared at her coffee. He was very good at making me believe things that weren't true. And now I sit in a 1-bedroom apartment in Peabody eating microwave dinners and thinking about the life I blew up because a man in an expensive suit told me I deserved more. She looked up. Her eyes were wet. "The life we had was everything, Griffin, and I threw it away. I threw it away while you were losing your father, and I will never forgive myself for that." I didn't know what to say. There's no script for this. No repair manual for a marriage that's already been scrapped. "The kids are doing well," I said. Iris made honor roll. Rowan's team won their basketball league. "I know. He told me." She smiled, but it was fragile, the kind of smile that's holding back a flood. "You're a good father. Better than I ever gave you credit for." I had a good teacher. We finished our coffee in silence. I paid the bill because some habits outlast the marriages they were formed in. She thanked me. I nodded. We walked out into the spring air and went our separate ways. Some nights after the kids are asleep, I drive out to Wheeler's Point and sit on the rocks by the water. I listen to the harbor settle, the creak of boats at their moorings, the clang of the bell buoy out past the breakwater, the ancient rhythm of the tide doing what it's always done, coming in and going out, patient and steady like my father. I think about the day Nora threw my clothes on the lawn. I think about picking up every piece without a word. I think about how small I must have looked, how beaten, how pitiful. A man in a dirty flannel gathering his belongings off the wet grass while the neighbors watched from their porches. Nobody on Maple Street pities me now. Not because of the money, not because of the land or the legal victory or the trust fund. They don't pity me because they see me every morning at the shop with grease on my hands doing the work. They see me at school pickup talking to the teachers, cheering at the games. They see me on weekends at Wheeler's Point with my brother, clearing the ground for a building that will carry my father's name long after all of us are gone. They don't pity me because I didn't break. My wife changed the locks. She threw my clothes from a window. She tried to take my children, my home, my dignity, and I picked up every piece, drove away without a word, buried my father in his own blue suit, and built a life worth living. My father never raised his voice, never bragged, never told a soul what he had. He just worked, saved, planned, and waited. And when the time came, he reached out from beyond the grave with a trust fund, a private investigator, and a 4-page letter that dropped my wife to the kitchen floor. Not bad for a fisherman from Rockport. Edmund Ashford, 1954 to 2025. Commercial fisherman, secret millionaire, and the best father a man could ask for. I'm sitting on his land right now. The sun is going down over the harbor. Iris just texted me a picture of a model boat she's building in her room, a replica of my father's old trawler, the Mary Colette, named after my mother. Rowan called to say he scored 16 points tonight. My mother left a voicemail that just says, I made chowder. Bring the kids tomorrow. 3 acres of possibility stretch out in front of me. And somewhere under this rocky soil is the foundation of something that will outlast us all. A fisherman's legacy. A father's love. A quiet man's answer to a loud, impatient world. Now, I want to ask you something. What would you have done if your spouse changed the locks and threw your clothes on the lawn on the worst day of your life? Would you have shouted? Would you have broken the door down? Would you have called the police, made a scene, and given the neighbors a show worth watching? Or would you have done what I did, picked up every piece in silence, driven away, and let the truth do the talking? And here's the bigger question. Has someone ever looked at your life, your job, your paycheck, and decided you weren't enough? Decided you were small and ordinary and not worth staying for? And were they wrong? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit somewhere deep, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Someone who's been knocked down and is wondering whether it's worth getting back up. It is. Trust me on that. It always is. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.